Okay, greetings everybody, and welcome back to the second session. My name is Mondli Makanya. I'm a member of the WJP board, and I am a journalist from South Africa. As you can imagine, I've come a long, long way, but I must say it's been an absolute privilege to have been in this room over the past 2 days, because the energy levels have been truly, truly inspirational. It has been worth every bit of insomnia that I've suffered. Yeah. If Gwelula, if you'll allow me, I just want to abuse my position for just 45 seconds, maybe a bit longer, because the previous chairperson didn't take my question. I've got the microphone. Yeah, no, just on the previous session. Just to share a very short, South African experience of the tension between so-called Western liberal law versus what is traditional legal systems. We've had quite a process. I mean, it's coming close to a decade now in South Africa. Customary law is recognized by in the Constitution. I mean, it's very implicitly recognized. So there's been a process of trying to formalize the informal legal system through something called the Traditional Courts Bill. And it's been placed before the courts, and the chiefs have obviously been the ones pushing very hard for it. And the governing party, the ANC, has been very much also pushing for it, because obviously for political reasons they want to have the support of the chiefs, and it means a lot in terms of electoral support. But there's been a huge pushback, and the pushback has come from women's groups, because what it will basically mean is that what you'll end up having is a two-tier system, that the people in the rural areas, particularly the women, will be disenfranchised and stopped from actually accessing justice via the formal system. And and it's gone to and fro. And it's been very interesting, because we're supposed to be, the Constitution of South Africa is supposed to be, it's supposed to be one of the most advanced. It was worked through very strongly, but the fact that it's the women who have stood very firm and said, no, we will not be second-class citizens. Why should the urban person have first bite at the formal system, at the formal legal system, and we basically become second-class citizens? And there was a new version that was put forward earlier this year, and again it went to and fro. And I suspect we will never actually get to resolve it, and everybody will eventually settle for a formal system. So it was just a little segue that I thought I should share. I mean, for those who are working in the area, might be worth actually looking at that particular process. But anyway, I am here in front for a very special reason. And that reason is to honor members of my tribe, the highest tribe on earth, and that is journalists. I don't get it. Yeah. It's really to hand over the WJP Anthony Lewis Prize for Exceptional Rule of Law. This is a prize that was just created to encourage and to honor journalists who have done work in this area, who have popularized the rule of law and the awareness and understanding of the importance of the rule of law. It was named after a great friend of the WJP, Anthony Lewis, who was a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and who incidentally did great work in covering the process towards the adoption of the South African Constitution in the 90s. And his work was one of the huge inspirations for the creation of this organization. As we all know, this organization does multidisciplinary work, interdisciplinary work, and that is the great strength and unique quality of this particular organization. And I think the past 2 days have actually shown just like how great that cross-pollination can be. But that work can happen in silos, and it can remain very hidden over there if it were not for the fact that there is this highest tribe on earth called journalists who disseminate information from time immemorial. We know about the things we do because the media tells us so. And good causes are spread because the media tells us so, and I'm not saying that we dictate to you, no. It's just the purveyors of knowledge, major purveyors of knowledge, not sole purveyors of knowledge. As they say, each newspaper is the first rough draft of history. The people who have won this prize this year are people who have done immense work, great work, very inspirational work in fighting for the rule of law, in exposing injustice, and actually achieving change. One of the things that we do as journalists is that we are idealists when we set out to want to change the world, and there's nothing that is as satisfactory as when you actually affect people's lives, you affect legislation, and you actually make sure that injustice is reversed. Now, this AP team, which is represented here by Martha Mendoza, covered the fishing industry in Southeast Asia, and where basically a form of modern-day slavery was taking place. And having exposed the corruption and injustices that were happening there, it actually resulted in the release of basically about 2,000 slaves. I don't think we can even call it slaves. They were actually living in conditions of slavery, and resulted in the arrests of people who were involved in that ring, and the seizure of ships that were involved in what was happening there, and also has resulted in legislation to deal with that. And I think I would encourage everybody to access it, and it is one of the most cutting-edge journalism endeavors in recent history. And I think it's something that will be taught in law schools and journalism schools for a long time to come. Having done so, I must say that they were front runners by far away in terms of the entries that we received, more than 100 entries that we received for this particular prize, high quality entries. And they also won the Pulitzer Prize. I must say, though, that we decided before the Pulitzer and I am reliably told that the Pulitzer people were going to announce it only after we had announced it, but we have a person who in our ranks by the name of Juan, who sleep talks. So he was on a plane, and seated next to him was a member of the Pulitzer board. So he happened to sleep talk and revealed that we had actually made this decision. So the Pulitzer people decided to bring it forward, and so unfortunately they stole our thunder. But at any rate,
I'm listening carefully.
yeah, at any rate, it was a really impressive field of entries. We had, with our honorable mentions, from around the world that I would like to mention today. Anas Aramea Anas from Ghana, Ned Dixit from India, Ruth Hopkins from the Republic of South Africa, and Kishali Pilo Jawaridina from Sri Lanka, and Ian Abina from the United States of America. I would like to congratulate you and your team for the really magnificent work, and hope that this will be an inspiration to many other journalists and media organizations to continue doing work like you have done. And thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'm so impressed to find everyone here doing this on a Saturday morning in California, having these incredibly engaged discussions. This is a wonderful recognition. We really appreciate it. I talked to Margie Mason and Robin McDowell yesterday at length about what this means for us. Anthony Lewis was a remarkable journalist who informed in the very best way his readers about the rule of law. We set out to find captive slaves, and we set out to follow their catch with detailed accuracy to whoever it ends up with. And the reason for this is because everybody knew that there was slavery happening at sea. And this is the work you're doing. Everybody can see from what you're doing and knows there's corruption. You have to take it that next step, and that's really what we wanted to do. We didn't expect to find an island of slaves, and that's what we stumbled into. There were men in cages. They were trapped and locked up and had been on boats or on this island for years. Some of them had not seen their families for decades. Once we had obtained stories of many of these Burmese men on a remote island in Indonesia, we used satellite technology to track the boat that their fish had been loaded onto into a harbor in Bangkok at Samut Sakhon, south of in South Thailand, mid Thailand. From there, we staked out the same boat as it was unloaded into trucks and followed the trucks to factories and exporters. And we used customs bills of lading then to identify where those exporters in Thailand were shipping to in the United States. The U.S. seafood importers then took further reporting to figure out where that seafood was being distributed to, because if you go to a supermarket, your fish may well just have a plastic wrap and the weight and the price on it. But in doing so, we were able to end up with a sentence that had the word slave and Walmart in the same sentence, which meant 3 lawyers were then involved with our story. When a rescue began soon thereafter, and hundreds, and it grew to several thousand slaves were taken off this island and other neighboring islands and brought to an evacuation center by the International Organization of Migration, which then gave them back their names, gave them back passports, and reunited them in their home countries of Cambodia, Burma, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam. When we learned through a somewhat impulsive survey of hundreds of these men while they were being processed that many more boats had fled and were still at sea, we tracked down those boats using a high-resolution photo from space, which identified the boats they were on, and we notified the law enforcement agencies in Australia, Papua New Guinea, and Indonesia. And as you said, that cargo was seized. 12 more people were arrested. At this point, 12 people have been convicted and sent to jail for human trafficking. In the United States, the State Department's immediate response was that we have laws that ban the import of slave-produced goods. That sent me down a rabbit hole of research in which I found that the 1935 Tariff Act had a loophole called consumptive demand, stemming from when that law was passed. The idea being that how can we begin to prepare for war without rubber, and how can we possibly obtain rubber that is not slave-produced? And so they wrote into the law that, yes, you can import slave-produced goods as long as there's a consumptive demand. And as a result, that law had not been used. Miraculously, last year, both parties agreed to change that law, and in February, Obama signed a trade bill that closes that loophole, and in March, Customs and Border Protection has began their first seizures at ports of what they call slave-produced goods, mostly from Chinese prison camps. We're not nearly close to done, as I know you aren't either. We feel like we scratched the surface to expose this is what's going on all over the place, people. This is when you guys talk about corruption or trafficking, here's exactly what it looks like, and here's exactly what can be done to make it right. So I very much appreciate the work you do. I know Margie and Robin do too. And I want you to know that this recognition makes it possible for us to go back to our managers and say, we need to keep this up. It's being recognized. So thank you very much.